I always struggle in moments like these. I'm excited. It's not that I'm not excited.
Yeah.
Can't wait for this conversation, but you're trained in broadcasting to, like, welcome people in with their title. And I'm like,
good luck.
We could spend an hour just on the title. So how about if I just say Bob Costas is with us? How about that on Willard and Dibs? Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hello, Mark. Hello, Dan. Sufficient introduction.
There you go. Yeah, it needs no introduction
Well,
at
how would
all.
you introduce yourself, Bob, if you had to introduce yourself? Like, of all the accolades and all the things you've done, is there one that you would say, yeah, I join you now and I'm known for this?
I really don't know. I come on the air, I say, with Ron Darling, I'm Bob Costas. With Doug Collins, I'm Bob Costas. With Ahmad Rashad, I'm Bob Costas. If you know who I am, good. If you don't know who I am, well, if you're watching, you'll find out.
Well,
That's
It really
pretty
doesn't
good.
matter that much.
yeah.
pretty strong.
Why don't we focus on the with Ron Darling part and start with baseball, Bob, because obviously the game is at, I don't want to call it a crossroads, but this is an interesting time with all of the rules changes, and I think along with it comes a little bit of a vibe of, instead of sitting down to just relax and enjoy the game, we've got to decide if all the changes help us enjoy the game. So baseball fans are thinking a lot. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good thing?
Well, everything has potential drawbacks, and there's some tinkering to go on as they try and figure it out and perfect it. But even if it never improves off what it is now, and there may be a few glitches within it, it's much better than what we put up with in recent years. Many people have heard me say this many times, and the reason why I keep saying it is I can't think of any better way to express it. Baseball is supposed to have a pleasing, leisurely pace. It always has, historically. But of late, it had a plodding, lethargic pace, and that was hurting the game as an entertainment product. You can feel that it's more enjoyable now. Are there little complaints? Will there be little glitches? Yeah. Could they perhaps tweak it a little bit as more evidence comes in? Sure. But right now, games are about a half hour shorter than they used to be. And within the overall of the game, the pace of it seems better. And it's not a false pace, because really, people ask me about it. They say, is it going to change how you broadcast the games? This was the average time and the basic pace in the 1980s and 90s when I was doing games for NBC. So this feels to me more like the baseball that I grew up watching, and that for most of my career I broadcast. It feels like that, and it feels much better than the general pace of baseball the last several years.
Is part of what has become of the general pace all of the time in between half innings and all of the stepping out of the batter's box and the readjusting of batting gloves, is it gotten to the point where maybe the pitch clock was too much of a dramatic change to what you talked about, the nice lethargic pace of the sport?
Well, actually, I don't know if it's changed a little bit in the last 48 hours, but going into Tuesday when I broadcast a Yankees-Phillies game for TBS, overall, the major leagues were averaging less than one pitch timer violation per game. It was like 0.90, something like that, per game. So generally, the adjustment has been pretty good. Have there been a few incidents? Tim Anderson got thrown out of a game. He complained about something and, had a problem with Logan Webb of the Giants, and was he quick-pitched? Those things are going to come up because there's thousands upon thousands of pitches just in a single day when there's a full schedule in Major League Baseball. You have to look at it in a macro sense, and in a macro sense, I think it's been a very good thing.
Bob, I get all that. I agree with you. I haven't been to a game yet, though, and here's something I wonder just about fan enjoyment. What happens if I go to get a hot dog and I miss 2 innings? Is baseball too fast now?
Well, was it too fast in the so-called golden age? I don't know how old you guys are, but it was pretty much that fast when I was growing up watching baseball. The Pirates and the Yankees, now this goes way back, but it's a memorable game. Pirates and Yankees played a 10-9 seventh game of the World Series in 1960, and it took barely more than 2.5 hours, and the final score was 10-9. In 2020, the Yankees and the Indians, as they were then still called, also played a 10-9 postseason game, and it took just a few minutes shy of 5 hours.
Wow.
Now, those are the extremes. There was, by the way, a rain delay in that game. I'm not including the rain delay. That's minus the rain delay. almost 5 hours. So again, whatever the flaws may be, it's certainly preferable to what happened before. And I don't remember having any difficulty getting a hot dog when I was a kid, or getting a hot dog and a beer when I was eligible to buy a beer. I don't remember any difficulty with that. The one thing that is not going to change, because it's too much of a moneymaker, is the time between innings. The time between innings is longer because the commercial breaks are longer, and that's not going to go away.
Yeah, it's the big moneymaker, without a doubt. Is part of the challenge for baseball dealing with the lack of attention that fans are now paying? We all have our smartphones, and we've all got so much going on outside of the baseball game. Is that something that fans will have to learn to, I don't know, pay attention to the game for which they've paid money to attend?
Well, I think when the pace is quicker, as it is now, then you're less likely to have your mind wander. Games that are timed, hockey, basketball, football, even if the game lasts, and those sports have half times, or in the case of hockey, 2 between period breaks, which extend the overall time. So even if the actual passage of time is 3 hours, let's say, longer than what is now the average baseball game, there's a clock ticking, and so you know when the game is going to end. Baseball's problem prior to this, among other problems, was you're in the 5th inning and the game's already 2 hours old. And it's a postseason game that's maybe starting late on the East Coast, so it can eke into prime time on the West Coast. And it's a weeknight, so people have to go to work or go to school. And by the time this game is over, you say to yourself, in the 5th inning, I can't stay up till midnight, so I'm going to bail. If you've got a better feeling about when it's likely to end, you're more likely to invest the time in the 5th or 6th inning.
Bob, we are knee-deep in the entire Warriors story right now, obviously, because, A, they're the reigning champs, but also because of the personalities and the feeling like there may not be a whole lot of time left. We noted that you were the voice of the NBA during Jordan's time and The Last Dance. We heard your voice over and over. What kind of parallels do you see between that and this?
I think the Warriors come close to it. You have to give the Spurs some credit for what they did in the early part of the 21st century, and the Lakers of Shaq and Kobe ran off 3 straight from 2000 to 2002. But I think the Warriors are probably the closest to that Michael Jordan Bulls run. But there are differences which are not the Warriors' fault. Steph Curry is one of the most compelling players to watch in the history of the NBA. He's just a very pleasing player to watch. So he's been the guy who most typifies the Warriors. That's obvious. But the Warriors' run takes place during a period of time when the NBA is essentially, I'm not counting local television, it's essentially a cable product. There's nothing wrong with the presentation on cable. The studio show on TNT is the best studio show in the history of sports. Barkley and Shaq and Kenny Smith and Ernie Johnson, terrific. And the games are well called, whether it's Mike Breen on ESPN and occasionally on ABC, or Kevin Harlan or whoever it might be on TBS. There's no problem with the presentation. But these games in the 21st century are less present in the general public imagination than they were in the 80s on CBS when it was Bird and Magic and Dr. J, and especially in the 90s. Take me out of it. I'm just being as objective as I can. Those games were on NBC. We would show double headers and sometimes triple headers on network television when the media landscape was much, much different. And primetime games, not just in the finals, but in the early rounds of the playoffs on weeknights. And the promos for those games, featuring Michael Jordan most often, were on Seinfeld and ER and Cosby and Friends and on Brokaw's newscast and Letterman and Johnny Carson. So if you make an argument, departing from the Warriors here, the LeBron-Jordan argument, you can make a good case for LeBron based on statistics. You can make no case for LeBron based on cultural impact. They're not going to make a movie like Air, which I just saw last night about Michael Jordan. Not going to make a similar movie about LeBron. There was just something about Jordan. He was the leading man. What he did objectively was tremendous, but his appeal, his star power, and then all the circumstances that came together in a perfect confluence That made Jordan and the Bulls even bigger. That amplified them. The Warriors do not have that platform on a national basis. In the finals, yes, but even in the finals, much of the country hadn't followed them all the way through, whereas that was the case with Jordan and the Bulls, not just in any given season, but one season built upon another. It was a decades or more long epic story of Michael Jordan, going back to his game-winning shot in 1982 for North Carolina and then continuing through the Dream Team in Barcelona and all the rest. So it's no fault of the Warriors or the Spurs or the early 2000s Lakers or whatever it might be. There's just something about Jordan and the Bulls that cannot be approached. One thing I would say, and I'll end this long ramble here on this note about the Warriors, the parallel that comes to mind on this thing is actually to football. Their masterpiece was the season when they lost after having a 3-1 lead in the finals. They lost to LeBron and the Cavaliers. They had bested, statistically, the Bulls' record for best single-season record. And they seemingly, of all their seasons, that was their best team. But it was like Belichick's Patriots, the year they could have gone 19-0, and they just didn't quite win the Super Bowl against the Giants. If they go 19-0, that's their crowning achievement. It's one more Super Bowl. They erase the Dolphins 17-0 in the early 70s as the only perfect season. That's their crowning achievement. And it eluded them. And not to take anything away from the Warriors, but failing to finish off the Cavaliers as they were expected to do, that denied them their crowning achievement. Maybe that would have elevated them a little bit more and a bit closer to the Bulls with 5 championships to Chicago's 6.
Bob, we'll get your Siskel and Ebert on the movie here in just a second.
Nice.
But it's one thing to sort of compare the dynasties. Maybe another thing to compare their end. When you look at the last dance, if you will, the way it ended with the Bulls, how would you compare that to what we're currently experiencing with the Warriors? Contractual things are up this offseason, the punch in training camp, factoring all of that into it.
Well, again, while there was controversy and there were antagonisms and all the rest, personal feuds, soap opera type drama surrounding the Bulls as well, if you're just talking about theater, how could you have a better ending if you scripted it? It's the best ending in the history of American team sports. John Elway won back-to-back Super Bowls in his last 2 years. Pretty darn good. Ted Williams hit a home run in his last time at bat, but it wasn't in the World Series. It was on a dreary weekday afternoon at Fenway Park many years ago. It's still the highest-rated game in NBA history, Game 6 in 1998. The Bulls and the Jazz. And not only does Jordan perform heroically, scoring 45 points in an 87-86 game, and that's something you have to take into consideration. Jordan averaged 30 points a game for his career, won 10 scoring titles. That 30 points is different in that era than it would be, or something close to it would be in this era, when it's nothing to see games that are 130 to 125. So he performs heroically, yes. But the last moment, if you were scripting a movie, how could you do it any better? The classic jump shot, he holds the pose, swish. That the Warriors will be remembered as a great, great team. Curry will be remembered as the greatest shooter in the history of basketball. Steve Kerr is a Hall of Fame coach, and nobody won as much as him, except maybe Phil Jackson. When you think of all the championships he was part of as a player and then as a coach, they'll all be remembered as among the greatest of the great. But the story is just not as theatrical as the Bulls.
Is part of that the way the game is being played now, where 125 points may not be enough? And the fact that those games were in the high 80s, does that lend itself to even more drama than this up and down, everyone shoots a 3 style of NBA?
Yeah, the 3 used to be a punctuation. When Reggie Miller launched one, it was a punctuation. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Analytics indicate that it's the right thing to do. So that's what they go with. You can't ask people to do something just for the sake of theater that may not be the best thing to do competitively. But there is a certain... I think the Warriors are an exception to this, because the way the Warriors play is so pleasing and so exciting, generally speaking. But when almost everybody is playing that way, when you see a fast break, and instead of guys going to the basket and a beautifully executed fast break and a pass for a layup. Two guys are going to the opposite corners to set up for a three. The game loses some texture. It isn't that the three shouldn't be part of it, and maybe it should be more a part of it than it used to be. But when it becomes such a disproportionate part of it, then some of the texture of the game, the mid-range jumper, the sharp pass that leads to a driving layup, some of that is reduced. It's not eliminated, but it's reduced. And as you say, every basket counts more when the game is a lower score. I mean, that's a simple mathematical fact.
Okay, so what'd you think of the movie?
Exactly.
I like the movie very much. Viola Davis's performance as Dolores Jordan is just magnificent. And Matt Damon's performance is very good as a character named Sonny Vaccaro. But I'll say this. If you knew Sonny Vaccaro, and I didn't know him well, but I interviewed him and I knew him and I know what he looks like, I know what he talked like, that might as well be a different person. There's no resemblance between Matt Damon and Sonny Vaccaro physically, or he delivers this wonderful soliloquy trying to sell the Jordan family on Nike. Sonny Vaccaro was persistent. He was dogged. He was not capable of delivering the kind of speech that Matt Damon delivers as Sonny Vaccaro. Ben Affleck looks very much like Phil Knight. If I was David Falk, I'd be putting together some kind of defamation suit. Obviously, David Falk, as Jordan's agent, was a hard-driving agent. But he wasn't Ari Emanuel or Ari Gold, who was modeled after Ari Emanuel, cursing every other word and screaming at everybody like a prototypical agent. Plus, David is tall and bald. And I think it might have been Jason Bateman who played him. I should know this, and I don't. But in any case, no physical resemblance, but also no resemblance in temperament and demeanor, at least as I have known David Falk. Now, does that make it a not entertaining movie? No, it's a very entertaining movie and very well presented. And the essential story of how Nike got Michael Jordan and how together they built this fantastic business enterprise, the essential story of that is true. And the farsightedness and the strength of character of Mr. and Mrs. Jordan is true. So what's at the heart of the story is absolutely true. How some of the characters are portrayed is an extreme case of dramatic license.
That's great. I thought maybe John Turturro could have played Sonny Vaccaro, somebody a little bit more of a slick nature like that. But you're right.
You know what? That's a good call. And John Turturro is a big basketball fan.
Bob, what a treat, man! What a treat to get your perspective on so many things. Thank you so much. Appreciate you hopping on.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
All right, you
Thanks,
too.
Bob.
There
You
he
too.
is. That is
pretty cool.
Bob Costas is pretty cool. And a movie review to boot.